Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1: The Weighing of the Heart. When an Egyptian's life came to an end, the journey was believed to continue beyond the world of the living. The soul traveled into the Dua, the mysterious realm that lay between earthly life and the eternal afterlife. This was not a place entered lightly, for every soul would eventually stand before a divine judgment unlike any found among mortals. The deceased began the journey by passing through gates, waterways, and sacred regions inhabited by powerful beings. Prayers, spells, and sacred knowledge accompanied the traveler, helping them navigate the dangers that lay ahead. Yet no preparation mattered more than the truth carried within the heart. At the center of the Duat stood the Hall of Two Truths, a vast chamber where the gods gathered to witness judgment. There sat Osiris, Lord of the Dead, enthroned in majesty. Beside him stood divine beings who observed the proceedings, while Anubis, guardian of the dead and guide of souls, prepared the sacred scales. The soul approached the scales knowing that nothing could be hidden. Wealth, titles, and earthly achievements held no power there. Only the life that had been lived would matter. Before the assembled god, the deceased recited declarations of innocence, affirming that they had not committed act of cruelty, theft, injustice, or wrongdoing against others. Then came the moment of judgment. Anubis carefully removed the heart of the deceased, for the Egyptians believed the heart was the seat of memory, intention, and character. Every choice, every action, and every hidden thought remained recorded within it. Upon one side of the scales, Anubis placed the heart. Upon the other, he placed the feather of Maat, goddess of truth, justice, harmony, and cosmic balance. The hall fell silent as the scales moved. Nearby stood Thoth, goddess of wisdom and writing, prepared to record the outcome. If the heart balanced perfectly against the feather, the soul was declared worthy. Such a heart reflected a life lived in harmony with Maat and the divine order of the universe. Yet another figure waited beside the scales. Amit, known as the Devourer, possessed the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. If the heart proved heavier than the feather, burdened by wrongdoing and imbalance, Amit would consume it. The soul would cease to continue into the blessed afterlife. For those whose hearts balanced against the feather, the gates of eternal peace opened. They entered the field of reeds, a paradise where the land was fertile. Loved ones could be reunited, and harmony endured forever. There they lived in the presence of the gods, having proven themselves worthy through the choices they made during life. Thus, the Egyptians remembered that every action carried weight. In the end, what determined a person's fate was not power, wealth, or status, but whether their heart remained in balance with truth. Story 2: The Harmony of Yin and Yang. Long ago, a student traveled through the mountains of China seeking wisdom. He had studied many teachings and memorized many texts. Yet questions continued to trouble him. Everywhere he looked, he saw conflict. Day struggled against night. Summer gave way to winter. Joy was followed by sorrow, and strength often opposed gentleness. The world seemed divided into endless opposites. Hoping to find answers, the student journeyed to a remote valley where an elder sage was said to live. After many days of travel, he found the old teacher sitting beside a stream that wound quietly through a grove of pine trees. The sage welcomed the traveler and listened patiently as the young man described his confusion. "The world appears to be made of opposing forces," the student said. "How can there ever be harmony when everything seems to pull against everything else?" The sage smiled but did not answer immediately. Instead, he invited the student to remain for a time and observe the valley. For several days, the student watched the world around him. Each morning, sunlight illuminated the mountains, and each evening, darkness returned. Rain nourished the fields, while dry weather allowed crops to mature. Strong winds bent the trees, yet the same winds carried seeds across great distances. Everywhere he looked, opposing forces appeared to interact rather than simply compete. One evening, the sage drew a circle in the earth. Within it, he traced two flowing shapes that curved around one another. One was dark, the other light. Within each shape, he placed a small circle of the opposite color. This, the sage explained, is Yin and Yang. He pointed toward the dark half first. Yin represented qualities such as night, rest, reflection, stillness, and receptivity. Then he indicated the light half. Yang represented day, action, movement, strength, and activity. The student nodded. So they are enemies? No, the sage replied. They are partners. The old teacher gestured toward the mountains surrounding them. Day inevitably became night. Winter eventually gave way to spring. Strength required rest, and action depended upon reflection. Neither force existed independently. Each contained the seed of the other, just as the symbol showed. As the seasons passed, the student began to understand. Harmony did not arise because one force defeated another. It emerged because both remained in balance. When either became excessive, disorder followed. When both worked together, life flourished. At last, the student prepared to leave, looking once more at the symbol drawn in the earth. He realized that wisdom was not found in choosing one side of existence over another. It was found in recognizing the relationship between them. The sage watched him depart with a knowing smile. The lesson the traveler carried home was simple, yet profound. Balance is not achieved by eliminating differences, but by allowing opposing forces to exist in harmony. Story 3. The Gift of Ayni. High among the Andes mountains, where snow-capped peaks rose above the clouds and terraced fields clung to the hillsides, the people lived according to an ancient principle known as Ayni. It was a simple idea, yet one that shaped every part of life. Those who received help were expected to offer help in return, not as a debt to the repaid immediately, but as part of the balance that connected families, neighbors, and communities. One year, a farmer named Tupa prepared his fields for planting. The mountain soil was fertile, but the work required to cultivate it was immense. Stones had to be cleared, irrigation channels repaired, and terraces strengthened before seeds could be sown. As Tupa looked across the land he hoped to plant, he realized the task was too great for one person to complete alone. Following the customs of his people, Tupa invited relatives and neighbors to assist him. On the appointed day, men, women, and children arrived from nearby homes. Some carried tools, while others brought food to share. Together, they worked beneath the bright mountain sun. They repaired walls, turned the soil, and prepared the fields with laughter and conversation filled the air. By sunset, work that would have taken Tupa many weeks had been completed in a single day. Before everyone departed, a great meal was shared. The gathering was not merely about labor. It strengthened friendship, honored relationships, and reminded everyone that survival in the mountains depended upon cooperation. Months later, another farmer faced a similar challenge. Heavy rains had damaged irrigation channels feeding his fields. Water that should have nourished crops now flowed wastefully down the slopes. Remembering the help he had once given Tupa, the community gathered again. Tupa was among the first to arrive, bringing tools in eager hands. The work continued from village to village throughout the years. When homes needed building, neighbors came. When harvests arrived, families worked side by side. When hardship struck one household, others shared what they could spare. No written contracts governed these exchanges. Trust and mutual responsibility sustained them. According to the old stories, the mountains themselves favored those who honored Ayni. Crops flourished when cooperation thrived, and communities grew stronger when people remembered that their well-being was connected to the well-being of others. Elders taught children that no one truly prospered alone. Every blessing carried an opportunity to contribute to the balance that sustained the whole community. Thus, Ayni endured through generations. It was not simply a custom or economic practice, but a way of understanding life itself. The people believed that harmony existed when giving and receiving remained in balance, and that the strength of the community depended upon the willingness of each person to support the others. Story 4. Themis and the golden scales. In the age when gods and mortals still interacted freely, there lived among the Olympians a titaness named Themis. She was revered not for strength in battle or mastery of her storms, but for something equally powerful. Themis embodied divine law, justice, wisdom, and the natural order that governed both gods and humans alike. Unlike many deities whose stories were filled with conflict and adventure, Themis was often found beside the throne of Zeus, offering counsel during moments when difficult decisions needed to be made. Her wisdom was respected throughout Olympus because she understood that power without justice eventually created chaos. One day, a dispute arose between two neighboring kings. Both claimed ownership of a fertile valley that lay between their kingdoms. The land provided abundant harvests, and neither ruler was willing to surrender it. Messengers carried accusations back and forth, armies gathered along the borders, and war seemed inevitable. Unable to resolve matters otherwise, the king sought the judgment of gods. Their pleas rose to Olympus, where Zeus listened carefully before turning to Themis for guidance. The Titaness descended to the mortal world and summoned the rulers to meet before her. Each king presented his claim. One spoke passionately about ancestral rights, while the other argued that his people had cultivated the valleys for generations. Witnesses were called, evidence presented, and arguments repeated, yet neither side could agree. As the sun climbed across the sky, Themis listened patiently. She asked questions that neither king expected and examined details that others had overlooked. More importantly, she considered not only what each ruler desired, but what outcome would preserve harmony and fairness. At last, she brought forth a pair of golden scales. Before the assembled crowd, she explained that justice required balance. No decision could favor one side simply because it possessed greater power or influence. The needs, responsibilities, and actions of both parties had to be weighed carefully. After hearing all testimony, Themis delivered her judgment. The valley would not belong entirely to either kingdom. Instead, both peoples would share responsibility for its care and benefit from its harvests. Clear agreements would govern its use, ensuring fairness for future generations. Though neither king received everything he wanted, both recognized the wisdom of the decision. The threat of war faded, and the valley continued to prosper under shared stewardship. The people celebrated, grateful that peace had prevailed where conflict once seemed certain. The story endured because it illustrated the gift Themis brought to the world. Justice was not vengeance, nor was it favoritism. It was a careful balancing of competing needs, guided by wisdom rather than pride. For this reason, artists often depicted Themis holding scales, a symbol that continues to represent fairness and impartial judgment to this day. Daily Thread for June 24th, The Balance. Balance is not the absence of power, responsibility, emotion, or ambition. Rather, it is the ability to hold many forces together without allowing any single one to overwhelm the others. The ancient traditions often understood that life unfolds between seeming opposites. Action and rest, strength and compassion, giving and receiving, justice and mercy, individuality and community. Problems arise not because these forces exist, but because one grows so dominant that harmony is lost. The stories of many cultures remind us that wisdom is found, not at the extremes, but in the careful stewardship of what has been entrusted to us. Power requires restraint, freedom requires responsibility, prosperity requires generosity, knowledge requires humility. When any gift is left ungoverned, it can become destructive rather than beneficial. Balance, therefore, is not a passive state, but an active practice. It requires awareness, adjustment, and the willingness to recognize when something within our lives has drifted too far in one direction. The old storytellers understood that healthy communities, wise leaders, and fulfilled individuals all depend upon this principle. They taught that every action creates ripples, every choice affects relationships, and every blessing carries responsibilities alongside its rewards. True harmony does not mean every part of life receives equal attention at every moment. It means that over time, nothing essential is neglected. In the end, balance is an act of protection. It safeguards relationships, preserves well-being, strengthens communities, and ensures that the gifts we possess continue to serve their intended purpose. By learning to govern our strengths wisely, we create stability not only for ourselves, but also for those whose lives intersect with our own.